return nobody believed was possible. Ben Simmons may be preparing to walk back into the one city that watched him rise like a future superstar and collapse under the brightest spotlight in basketball. Philadelphia, the same city that celebrated him as the #1 pick. The same fan base that believed he and Joel Embiid could build a dynasty. The same organization he left after one of the most painful playoff failures in recent NBA history. Now, after years of injuries, criticism, and questions about whether his career was already finished, Simmons is suddenly connected to Philadelphia again. And this is not just another ordinary NBA rumor. This is about a player possibly returning to the exact place where he lost his confidence, his reputation, and the trust of almost everyone around him. At his peak, Simmons looked unstoppable. He was a 6'1" playmaker with elite speed, incredible court vision, and the ability to defend nearly every position. He won Rookie of the Year, became a 3-time All-Star, and appeared destined to become one of the most complete players of his generation. Then one playoff moment changed everything. The passed-up dunk against Atlanta, the Game 7 defeat, Joel Embiid's frustrated comments, Doc Rivers publicly questioning whether Simmons could lead a championship team, the holdout, the fines, the trade to Brooklyn, the back surgeries, the disappearing explosiveness. In just a few years, Simmons went from being Philadelphia's future to becoming one of the NBA's biggest unanswered questions. But now, the story may be turning again. His representatives insist that Simmons has rebuilt his body and recovered from the injuries that destroyed his time in Brooklyn. Teams have reportedly begun looking at him differently. And the most shocking possibility of all is that Philadelphia may not be completely closed to a reunion. Could Simmons really return to the team he once refused to play for? Could Joel Embiid forgive the past? And would Philadelphia give one of its most controversial former stars a final chance at redemption? Tell us where you are watching from today. Comment your city or country below and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. Press 1 if Ben Simmons deserves another chance in Philadelphia, or press 2 if the Sixers should never bring him back. The chosen one of Philadelphia. Before Ben Simmons became one of basketball's most debated players, he was the answer Philadelphia believed it had been waiting for. When the 76ers selected him first overall in the 2016 NBA draft, the expectations were enormous. Simmons was not viewed as a project. He was supposed to change the franchise immediately at 6'1". He moved like a guard, passed like a veteran, and attacked in transition with speed and power few defenders could match. A foot injury delayed his debut, but it only increased the anticipation. When Simmons finally played, he showed why scouts had been so confident. He controlled games without needing 30 points, creating open shots, grabbing rebounds, pushing the pace, and defending multiple positions. His first active season ended with the Rookie of the Year award. All-star appearances and defensive honors followed. Philadelphia suddenly had 2 young stars in Simmons and Joel Embiid, and the future looked perfectly designed. Their contrast made the partnership exciting. Embiid could dominate inside and punish defenders with size. Simmons could grab a rebound and turn defense into offense before opponents reacted. One was a powerful scoring center. The other was a giant playmaker capable of controlling the floor. For a city that had endured years of rebuilding, this was supposed to be the reward. The process had finally produced 2 cornerstones capable of leading Philadelphia for the next decade. But underneath the excitement, one uncomfortable question followed Simmons. Could he become a reliable shooter? At first, the concern felt manageable. He was young, his athleticism was overwhelming, and his passing changed games. Coaches believed the shooting would eventually develop. Instead, the weakness remained. Over time, the one flaw everyone thought Simmons could overcome began threatening everything Philadelphia was trying to build, the flaw everyone tried to ignore. Ben Simmons could see passing lanes before they opened. He could defend guards, wings, and big men. He could turn a missed shot into a fast break in seconds. But there was one thing he rarely wanted to do: shoot. During the regular season, Philadelphia could often hide the problem. Simmons remained productive because of his size, defense, rebounding, and playmaking. Surrounded by shooters, he attacked open space and created easy opportunities for teammates. The playoffs were different. In a 7-game series, opponents studied every habit and forced stars into uncomfortable areas. Defenders stood farther away from Simmons, daring him to take jump shots. Coaches used intentional fouls because his free throw percentage made every trip to the line uncertain. Philadelphia kept waiting for him to respond. Every summer brought workout videos, reports about improved confidence, and promises that Simmons would become more aggressive. But when the pressure increased, the hesitation remained. The issue was no longer only mechanical. It had become psychological and strategic. Each missed free throw created more doubt. Each open shot he refused made defenders more comfortable. Each possession where he avoided the ball made the offense easier to predict. That also affected Joel Embiid. Philadelphia's best scorer often had to operate in crowded space because Simmons' defender could move toward the paint. Two extraordinary talents shared the floor, but their strengths did not always fit when playoff defenses became disciplined. Still, the Sixers believed the breakthrough would come. Simmons was too young, talented, and unique to abandon without trying every solution. Then, the 2021 playoffs arrived. Philadelphia finished first in the Eastern Conference. The roster looked ready for a championship run. Simmons no longer had the protection of potential. This was the moment when a franchise player had to prove he could survive the pressure. Instead, the weakness Philadelphia had ignored for years became impossible to hide. The play that changed everything. Game 7 against the Atlanta Hawks did not create every problem surrounding Ben Simmons. It exposed all of them at once. Philadelphia entered the series as the top seed in the Eastern Conference and the clear favorite. The Sixers had home court advantage, a dominant Joel Embiid, and a roster built to compete for a championship. Instead, the series became a test of Simmons' confidence. Atlanta repeatedly sent him to the free throw line and watched the pressure grow. His aggression faded. He stopped looking for contact. In fourth quarters, his scoring presence nearly disappeared. The player who once attacked the rim with force began handling the ball as if every decision carried the weight of the season. Then came the moment that would follow him for years. Late in Game 7, with Philadelphia needing points, Simmons caught the ball near the basket. He appeared to have a direct opportunity to finish. The crowd expected him to rise. His teammates expected a shot. He passed. The possession ended without the result Philadelphia needed, and the image became larger than one play. It represented every criticism Simmons had heard: the reluctance to shoot, the fear of the free throw line, and the possibility that he did not want responsibility when pressure was greatest. One decision did not lose an entire series. Philadelphia made many mistakes, and Atlanta earned the victory. But sports narratives are built on moments people can replay and remember. That pass became the symbol of the collapse. When the final buzzer sounded, Philadelphia's championship hopes were gone. Fans were furious. Analysts questioned Simmons' future. The organization that had protected him could no longer avoid the conversation. Before Game 7, he was a flawed star with time to improve. After Game 7, many saw him as a player who could not be trusted in the biggest moments. And what happened afterward turned a painful loss into a public breakup. The night trust disappeared. The most damaging part of Philadelphia's 2021 playoff loss may not have happened during the game. It happened in front of microphones afterward. Joel Embiid was asked where the contest had turned. He referenced the possession when Philadelphia passed up an opportunity near the basket. He did not need to say Ben Simmons' name. Everyone understood. Then Doc Rivers was asked whether Simmons could be the point guard on a championship team. Instead of offering complete support, the head coach said he did not know. Those comments traveled across the basketball world immediately. For a player already facing intense criticism, hearing doubt from the franchise's superstar and head coach changed everything. Simmons was no longer only defending himself against fans and analysts. He now questioned whether the people inside the organization still believed in him. Philadelphia may have viewed the comments as honest frustration. Simmons may have heard them as public betrayal. Either way, the damage was real. The offseason became a confrontation. Simmons communicated through his representatives that he wanted a trade. Reports suggested he had no intention of returning. When training camp arrived, he stayed away, and the Sixers began issuing fines. Every missed practice made reconciliation less likely. The conversation moved beyond basketball and became a fight about trust, contracts, responsibility, and respect. Simmons also spoke about mental and emotional challenges connected to returning to that environment. It was possible to recognize the contractual conflict while also recognizing that a player could be struggling privately under enormous pressure. Philadelphia fans had little patience left. Many believed Simmons had abandoned the team. Others felt the organization helped create the crisis by criticizing him publicly. The partnership that once represented the franchise's future was frozen. Simmons would not play. Philadelphia would not accept a weak return. Eventually, only a blockbuster could end the standoff. When that trade arrived, Simmons was sent to a new city with a chance to rebuild everything he had lost. The trade that was supposed to set him free? In February 2022, the standoff ended with one of the biggest trades of the season. Philadelphia sent Ben Simmons to the Brooklyn Nets in a package for James Harden. Two unhappy stars changed teams, and both franchises believed the deal could rescue their championship plans. For Simmons, Brooklyn offered what he needed: distance from Philadelphia, a new locker room, a different system, and a chance to rebuild his reputation without the same emotional history. On paper, the fit looked promising. With elite scorers around him, Simmons would not need to become a high-volume shooter. He could focus on defense, transition play, rebounding, and passing. Brooklyn could use him as a versatile connector instead of forcing him into the role that had become so uncomfortable in Philadelphia. But the fresh start never truly began. Before Simmons could establish himself, his back problems became more serious. A herniated disc required surgery, and recovery repeatedly delayed his return. When he finally played meaningful minutes, he did not look like the explosive athlete Philadelphia had drafted. His first step was slower. He avoided contact near the rim. The confidence that once made him dangerous in transition appeared fragile. Brooklyn needed a player who could stabilize the roster. Instead, the Nets received someone still trying to trust his own body. The numbers reflected the decline. Simmons attempted fewer shots, scored less, and struggled to remain available. Flashes of his passing and defensive awareness appeared, but never consistently enough to erase the concern. As Brooklyn's championship experiment collapsed, Simmons became one of the most expensive reminders of what had gone wrong. Critics concluded that he no longer cared. Others believed the injuries had removed the physical gifts that made his game possible. By the time Brooklyn was ready to move forward without him, Simmons' career had reached its lowest point. He was no longer discussed as a former all-star searching for another opportunity. He was discussed as a risk serious teams might refuse to take. But Simmons believed the league had not seen the final version of his story: broken, unmotivated, or misunderstood. The easiest version of the Ben Simmons story has always been the harshest one. A gifted player received a maximum contract, refused to develop a jump shot, collapsed under playoff pressure, left Philadelphia, and never recovered. That version is simple, it is also incomplete. Simmons deserves criticism. His lack of aggression hurt his teams. His refusal to shoot allowed playoff defenses to control possessions. The gap between his physical talent and production became impossible to ignore. But the physical problems were real. A serious back injury affects acceleration, balance, confidence, and the willingness to absorb contact. Simmons' offense was built around explosive movement. He needed to attack open space, change direction, and finish through defenders. Once his back became unreliable, every action carried greater risk. That does not explain every decision, but it changes the conversation. There was also the mental burden. Simmons became a national symbol of disappointment. Every missed free throw became content. Every quiet game became evidence that he had stopped caring. Every workout clip was mocked before he could prove anything in competition. The more he hesitated, the louder the criticism became. This created a cycle that was difficult to escape. Poor health reduced his confidence. Reduced confidence lowered his production. Lower production increased the pressure. Increased pressure made every decision feel more dangerous. None of that removes accountability. Great players are judged by how they respond when weaknesses are exposed. Simmons did not make the adjustments Philadelphia needed, and Brooklyn never received the player it expected. Still, reducing the entire story to laziness ignores the complexity of injury, confidence, and public failure. The real question is whether Simmons can still contribute if his body is stable and his role is realistic. He may never become the superstar Philadelphia imagined, but a healthy Simmons would not need to become a superstar to help a team. He would only need to accept what he is now and prove that the strengths that once made him special have not disappeared. The comeback nobody saw happen. While the basketball world treated Ben Simmons like a finished story, he quietly began rebuilding away from the spotlight. Publicly, people saw social media clips, vacations, and his interest in fishing. To critics, those images became proof that basketball was no longer his priority. They believed Simmons had accepted the money and moved on from the game. Behind the scenes, the picture was reportedly different. Simmons was working on the physical foundation his career depended on. The goal was not simply to become healthy enough to appear in game. It was to restore the movement, strength, and confidence that had disappeared after back surgery. A limited Simmons could survive on an NBA roster, but survival was not enough. His value came from unusual athleticism, pushing the ball after rebounds, defending multiple positions, creating passing angles, and attacking before defenses could organize. Rich Paul eventually delivered a clear message to the league. Simmons was healthy, prepared, and capable of contributing again. Teams do not rely on an agent's statement alone. They study medical information, organize workouts, and evaluate movement closely. If organizations began showing legitimate interest, Simmons had likely displayed enough progress to reopen a door many believed was closed. Then the story took its most surprising turn. Philadelphia emerged as a possible destination Simmons would reportedly consider. The idea sounded unbelievable. This was the city he had refused to return to. This was the fan base that turned one playoff possession into a permanent judgment. This was the organization involved in fines, tension, and one of the league's most uncomfortable breakups. Yet time changes situations. Rosters change. Relationships cool. Franchises become more willing to consider risks when the financial cost is manageable. A Simmons return would not erase the past. It would force everyone to face it. Philadelphia would have to decide whether redemption was worth the emotional danger. Simmons would have to accept that the city would not trust him immediately. Every free throw, open shot, and fourth quarter possession would be watched closely. The opportunity would be real. So would the pressure, and before any reunion could happen, one person's approval would matter more than every rumor combined. Joel Embiid holds the final answer. No discussion about Ben Simmons returning to Philadelphia can begin with the front office. It begins with Joel Embiid. Embiid is the center of the franchise, the player around whom every major decision must be built. His history with Simmons includes success, frustration, public criticism, and a partnership that ended without closure. At their best, the two stars were dangerous. Simmons created transition opportunities and defended elite perimeter scorers. Embiid controlled the paint, drew double teams, and carried the scoring burden. Together, they transformed Philadelphia from a rebuilding project into a contender. But the fit was never simple. Simmons' refusal to shoot allowed defenders to crowd Embiid's space. In playoff games, the offense became slow and predictable. Embiid often had to create difficult shots while Simmons became less involved late in games. The emotional damage may be harder to repair than the tactical problems. Embiid's comments after the Atlanta loss became part of the breakup. Simmons' holdout left the roster answering questions for months. Any reunion would require an honest conversation about what happened and what each player expects now. Embiid would need to believe Simmons could help rather than reopen an old distraction. Simmons would need to accept a smaller role. His best path would be to defend, rebound, push the pace, screen, cut, and create for teammates. He would also need to show enough willingness near the basket that opponents could not completely ignore him. A low-risk contract could make the experiment easier financially. Emotionally, there would be no such thing as low risk. The first poor performance would bring back old memories. Missed free throws in a close game would make the arena tense. Every interaction between Simmons and Embiid would be analyzed. That is why Embiid's support would have to be genuine. A polite public statement would not be enough. The locker room would need to know both players had accepted the past. If Embiid says no, the story ends before it begins. If he says yes, Philadelphia could create one of the NBA's most fascinating comeback opportunities. But even then, everything would depend on whether Simmons can face the pressure he once escaped. Redemption or one final mistake. Ben Simmons returning to Philadelphia would not be a normal signing. It would be one of the most emotionally complicated reunions the NBA has seen in years. A test of memory, trust, health, accountability, and the power of a second chance. From a basketball perspective, the argument is easier to understand than many people want to admit. A healthy Simmons could still defend multiple positions, push the ball in transition, rebound at a high level, and create opportunities for teammates without needing plays called for him. Philadelphia would not need the former number one pick to become the superstar it once imagined. The Sixers would only need him to accept a defined role and perform it consistently. That role should be simple: defend the opponent's best perimeter player, attack open space, set screens, cut aggressively, create in transition, and use his passing vision to make the offense easier for everyone around him. He would not need to chase 20 points per game. He would need to bring energy, discipline, and reliability, but that is also where the greatest risk begins. Simmons has not consistently proved that his body can survive the demands of a full NBA season. He has not shown that he will remain aggressive when defenders leave him open, and he has never faced the first missed free throws in a close game could bring every old memory back into the arena. The first moment of hesitation near the basket could become a national headline before the night is over. Strategically, the Sixers would need clear boundaries. Simmons should be surrounded by shooting whenever possible. His minutes should be managed carefully. His role should be based on present performance, not his former reputation. The organization cannot expect him to become the player he was supposed to be in 2018. It must evaluate the player standing in front of it now. Joel Embiid would also need to support the decision privately, not just offer a safe statement to the media. The locker room would have to believe the past had been addressed honestly. Simmons would need to show that he understands why teammates and fans lost trust. Philadelphia would need to show that it can hold him accountable without turning every setback into humiliation. That may be the most important lesson in this entire story. Athletes should be responsible for their choices, but they should not be permanently reduced to the worst moment of their careers. Simmons made mistakes. He failed to improve important weaknesses. He allowed fear and hesitation to affect major games. But injuries also changed his body. Public criticism damaged his confidence, and Philadelphia's leadership allowed frustration to become a public breakup. A second chance does not mean pretending none of that happened. It means learning from it. For Simmons, redemption would not come from one great game or one viral highlight. It would come from showing up every day, accepting uncomfortable responsibilities, and slowly rebuilding trust through his actions. For Philadelphia, growth would mean giving him a professional opportunity without reopening old hostility. For Embiid, it would mean deciding whether the possibility of winning together is more important than the pain of how their partnership ended. Peace does not come from denying conflict. It comes from facing it honestly, accepting responsibility, and refusing to let past anger control every future decision. Maybe Simmons returns and proves that a career can recover after injury, failure, and public rejection. Maybe the emotional damage is too deep. Or maybe another organization offers the fresh beginning Philadelphia simply cannot provide. Whatever happens next, Ben Simmons' story is no longer only about basketball. It is about talent, pressure, pride, physical pain, forgiveness, and whether one of the NBA's most criticized players can write a final chapter that changes how people remember everything that came before it. Where are you watching from today? Comment your city or country below. Press 1 if Ben Simmons deserves another opportunity in Philadelphia, or press 2 if the Sixers should leave the past behind. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with another NBA fan so you never miss the next major story shaking the league.